Hey everybody, welcome to Therapist Take, and we're going to talk about this idea called selective outrage, so don't go anywhere. Greetings everyone, welcome to this episode of Therapist Take, and we're going to talk about this idea of selective outrage. So this was inspired by the Netflix special by Chris Rock recently that was supposedly or reportedly, which I think it's a safe report, a response to the slap heard from around the world, is what they say.
Right,
I actually heard recently they call it Slapgate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Haven't heard that one.
if you got any other clever names for it, that'd be great. Those are always fun to do. But the concept really intrigued me in general when I heard the name of it, and I was like, ooh, I want to hear more about this. Of course, I had an idea of what it was going to be about, but Chris, of course, hearing Chris Rock's take on it really has that comedic feel to it, and
Right.
he's definitely, in my opinion, a response to what happened. So, but we're going to talk about 4 different things, and so we'll tell you what those are real quickly, and then we'll dive right into it. Okay. So the first thing is we're just going to talk about the question of what is selective outrage. And then we're going to move into, is it ever okay to have selective outrage? And then we're going to talk probably more so about the importance of critical thinking. That's an important piece of that. And the second and third one kind of go hand in hand. And then lastly, we're just going to do a book review on Will Smith's book that came out before the slap heard from around the world, and talk about that book a little bit. So that's what we're going to do.
Okay.
So let's get started. All right, so in talking about, well, when you hear the term selective outrage, what immediately comes to mind?
Our political landscape.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the different things that people get bent out of shape about, and then something else is seemingly similar.
Right.
Is
right.
They're not outraged about, right?
Right. Right.
Which is the point of Chris Rock, and so I mean his special, and that's actually one of the examples he uses, which is funny on the surface of it. He says that some people will be playing Michael Jackson and jamming along to Michael Jackson, but they become activists if you put R. Kelly on, and he's like, it's the same thing, And so, but the question is it the same thing,
Right. Right.
And on the surface, it does kind of look like that it's the same thing. Why would you be all bent out of shape about R. Kelly, but you are okay with listening to Michael Jackson?
Right.
So we're going to dive into that a little bit later. Yeah. So, what, do you have anything that comes to? I know we kind of try to avoid diving on political specifics or anything, but
Sure.
just any kind of dichotomy that comes to mind when you think of selective outrage.
I think that some things just come to mind is the idea of protecting the planet. I know that of course I want this place to be safe and all that kind of stuff, but I hate paper straws.
Yeah.
I hate them. They disintegrate in my mouth. I don't like them. And so, it's kind of that idea of trying to be thoughtful and mindful of waste, etc. But I choose a plastic straw.
Yeah.
Right. Only because of my comfort. But I'm furious when they talk about them in the ocean.
Yeah. Or you see one stuck up a turtle's nose or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right. That's a really good example, and I think it also brings up the point that we all do it.
Right.
That's the other hard piece. So, in some sense, we could say Chris Rock is having selective outrage over selective outrage.
Yeah,
because,
sure.
he has had selective outrage somewhere in his life at some point in time, right?
Right.
And so, but the environment, that's a really good one, because I think a lot of people, even people that aren't gung-ho about it, still often will be mindful about certain things.
Right.
But there are usually certain things that we're passionate about, and I think that's really the key. Like, we're passionate about something, but we can't be passionate about everything.
Right.
And my wife and I have had this conversation too, like when it comes to what you're choosing to be an activist on, like you represent. It's like, you only have so much energy and time in a day to devote to something, and so why is your outrage for what's going in the LGBTQ community different from what's going on in the Black community or something like that?
Sure.
You know, and I think most social justice, warriors will say that they are outraged by that, but they will devote a lot of their time to one specific thing because that's where their heart and their passion is.
Right,
so.
right. And I think the thing about the passion is that passion, just the word means that it's going to take over or it's going to pull you, right? Sure. It's got drive. It's got, sometimes we use passion and obsession, right, as kind of they go together. And so when it comes to issues that we're passionate about, we can get very, very in the trenches with it. And it may be hard to see, right, the selective outrage, right? That I may, talk about saving energy, et cetera, but I have the plastic straws. So,
right.
I think, again, passion often can lead you to not see other parts, right?
Right. And so that would be, let's just use the plastic straw example, because that kind of is a good segue into is it ever okay to have? Okay. So, and I think the plastic straw example is a good example, because is it okay for Carrie to drink out of plastic straws, but also have a heart and passion for protecting the environment and being an advocate against things like plastic straws, right? And I think the answer to that is sometimes. If and I think another piece to that too is what your outrage looks like.
Yes.
Too, right? Absolutely. Like if you're blasting people all over the internet about using plastic straws, and next thing you know, here's a picture of Carrie drinking out of a plastic straw. It's like, that does seem a little bit hypocritical. Right? I think it was going political here. I think it was it Nancy Pelosi that was during COVID was caught in the salon, right? In a public situation where we were right in the heart of COVID, and everybody's they're pushing masks and things like that, and here she is in a public setting without a mask, and I think that would probably be something Chris Rock would describe as selective outrage, and so as you said, it's all over the political realm. So I do think it's okay to have it, but how you exhibit it is
and I mean, the answer to any therapist question is never going to be yes or no. It's always going to be So I think what I would actually say is that it's inevitable. It's inevitable to have selective outrage, because you can only care about so many things at the same time, and everything connects to everything. And so, if I care about the environment, does that mean that I have to be, vigilant about everything all the time in a world where that's not really possible, right? Or at least not this phase of life when I have other things I have to do. So, so the idea is, I think, rather than asking, is it okay? I think the adaptive question is, how do I deal with this, right? And like you're bringing up, like, to what extreme? Right.
Exactly. So kind of along those lines, is there a situation where it's, or what does it look like when it's not okay? And I think a good example that is going to hit home for all of us is the school shootings. We just had a school shooting in Nashville. Everybody, in my opinion, every American citizen should be, or even American, even if you're not a citizen in America, if you live in America, you should be outraged by school shootings or mass shootings. Now, what the solution is to that is going to can be different from person to person. But what we can all agree on is that it's horrific. It needs to stop, and we probably need to be pushing to move toward a solution for it. And so that's a whole other discussion we can have. But that'd be an example where if you're, that I'd say, like, if you're not outraged by that, then you're not paying attention, or you're checking out, disassociating or something.
Right.
You know, like,
right.
But that would be a situation where I'd say, you know, selective outrage is definitely not okay.
Right. Right.
You know,
that whole idea too, if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing,
right.
really points out the extremes you're illustrating here. If you're not aware of the danger of, you know, mass shootings, then you're just kind of checked out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so as we're talking about it, this is, I think, where the importance of critical thinking comes in.
Right.
So that's our third topic, and so it really kind of goes right along with it's this. I think it really answers the question of, is it okay or not okay? Well, maybe, you know, and that's where critical thinking comes in the importance of it. And to be honest with you, like, therapists are really trained critical thinkers.
Absolutely.
Really. And so our job is to be, not only be trained critical thinkers, but also to help our clients learn, navigate their issues through the art of critical thinking. Absolutely. It's just one way of doing it.
Right,
therapy.
Sure.
And so, you know, to answer the question, is it right or is it wrong or is it ever okay? I think you really got to have the ability, or at least the desire, to critically think the issue, and it's hard.
It is hard.
Not just on an intellectual level, but just on an emotional level too. Because then, like, if for example, you're like, I'm a big proponent of, you know, supporting the health of the environment and getting paying attention to, you know, the earth and what we're doing to it. And then while you're talking, you're drinking out of a plastic straw and a styrofoam cup, you know, and someone says, well, what about your plastic straw and styrofoam cup? And you're like, oh, that's different, right? That's to me always the telltale sign of someone who hasn't really thought through it. They're like, oh, that's different, but that's about it. Yeah. You know, and then we pivot to something else.
Yeah. And I think the critical thinking is challenging emotionally and psychologically, because you're probably not going to arrive at a clear conclusion or at a clearly peaceful place. You're going to have to acknowledge that critically thinking about this may actually mean that I'm just uncomfortable. My conclusion is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I care about the environment, and sometimes I use plastic straws.
Yeah. And can I reconcile the two? You know,
right.
And because critical thinking really is an effort toward self-awareness.
That's right. And that's really the you know, that statement, you know, awareness is half the battle.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
And we all love to be aware of other people.
Oh, of other people, yeah.
Like I can critically think for you all day long.
Right.
And I have no problem with that, right?
But I think critical thinking is inviting, you know, something that I agree that therapists are trained in, and we help our clients do every day, which is to think through what you think and to give yourself permission to change your mind.
That's a good point.
Because if you can't, if you believe, I always tell my clients that, thank goodness I don't think the things I thought at 25.
Yeah.
Because I should, and we all should have permission to grow, develop, and change our minds, right? And critical thinking is a beautiful, maybe the only vehicle to get there.
Right. And it is something that drives me nuts in the political realm. And I think, you know, Adam Grant actually talks about this a little bit on his tiers of kind of different types of thought processes, and critical thinkers being a tier above political thinkers. And but what drives me nuts about politicians is they'll, like, someone said this 20 years ago and now they're saying this, and I'm like, does anybody ever just say, I changed my mind?
Yeah.
Like, I can do that. Like, I did believe that then. I don't now. I have 20 years experience and information.
Right.
But it's like no one ever says that, because in order to say that, you have to say I'm wrong. I feel like I was wrong back then.
Right.
And politicians seemingly don't ever want to admit they're wrong about something.
Yeah.
Or inaccurate, or I don't even like to even say, I mean, right or wrong with some of those things. Like, were you wrong for using straws or supporting straws? No, you're not wrong for doing that, but you might, like, I'm changing my mind about it based upon the information I have now.
Well, and I think that's where selective outrage again can become I don't know, self-defeating, right? If you're not allowing yourself to admit, I've learned new things, and to say I'm wrong and now I know different, and instead of obsessing about that I was wrong, and we focus our energy on, and this is what I've learned, allowing people to change, then that is selective outrage about not expecting people to be able to change and grow.
Right. So I'm guilty of
no way
of listening to Michael Jackson and not R. Kelly.
But what did Chris Rock say in his jokes? Because one has better music.
One has better songs. But so it got me thinking about, like, when he said that, I'm like, oh yeah, I've done that. And so I started critically thinking it, and like, what is it the same thing? Because that's what he says in the special.
Right.
He says it's the same thing, and it's like, well, it is and it isn't.
Okay. So what's your critical thought process there?
My critical thought process is that I feel like Michael Jackson probably did a lot of the things that he was accused of doing, but he wasn't convicted of it. So there's still that level of ambiguity of where does the truth lie in that? And I'm not saying it's not there for people who are convicted too.
Sure. But
it seemed like the evidence stacked against R. Kelly was that trial didn't last very long.
No, it seemed pretty significant.
And he was convicted of the crime, and it was evident, and there seems to be a lot more ambiguity. So it's kind of like maybe I should be a little more outraged on the side of the Michael Jackson side, and the other question is, like, does my outrage with celebrities and musicians, does that mean I can't listen to the music that they created, or does it mean I can't watch the shows that they made?
Sure.
Did we stop? I don't even know what movies. Honestly, what Harvey Weinstein made, which probably means I've watched some of them and not even know that I'm watching them. But are we going to stop watching those things? And that's where I think that judgment call is really to the individual. And sometimes we might have to do it based upon culture.
Sure.
Like the other thing too is all the Michael Jackson stuff there's a lot of time in between, and R. Kelly just happened. Right. So it's still, the R. Kelly situation is still really raw for people. Fresh. So culturally, it might be more appropriate to be more outraged with what R. Kelly did, because of it's still raw and on people's minds.
Sure.
And Michael Jackson is long ago, and he's passed away now, and nobody's talking about it much anymore except Chris Rock.
Well, now.
Here anymore, which you might.
But does that conclusion? I mean, how does that track emotionally?
I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah,
that's what it. Just him saying that and realizing that I've done that. It's like I feel like there's a discomfort there.
Sure.
As you said, I feel even uncomfortable talking about it because we're like live streaming right now. I'm like, I want to make sure I don't say something that is misconstrued.
Right.
But I think that's what critically thinking does, is that it forces you to take a deep dive into that really uncomfortable part of self, and look at these issues and the complexities of them. And and sometimes there's not, I actually think most of the time there's not a clear cut and dry answer.
I know, and I think you say a lot about searching for certainty, right? We're searching for certainty. I can and can't feel this way. This is okay or not okay, and we're not going to find that when we critically think, right? I remember that's why experiences like graduate school or intentional classes or certain things will really be a life changer for some people, because it forces you to identify what do you think and how do you know it, and that's oftentimes a very uncomfortable process.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's critically think the whole slap debacle thing. Anyway, so if I'm Chris Rock, I'm outraged. Because it was me getting slapped on national television at one of the most, prestigious events that exist for their industry, right? So someone said it was like, Will Smith might have felt like it was going to a barbecue, but I would say even for Will Smith, it was he knows he's not at a barbecue.
Right.
So yeah, if I'm Chris Rock, I'm outraged. If I'm his family, if I'm close to him, I'm outraged. If I'm the over the Oscars Guild or Screen Actors Guild or whatever it's called, I'd be outraged if that happened.
Sure.
But who else should be outraged, or you would think would be?
Fans of Chris Rock.
Yeah, a lot of fans of Will Smith are outraged.
They are
by what he did, disappointed in him.
Sure. Yeah.
Other actors in the industry.
Right.
Comedians.
Yep.
So the harder question, I think, is it okay to not be outraged?
I know.
By what Will Smith did.
I know.
And I go back to the first answer we gave earlier, which is maybe. Mm-hmm. I think you just need to be able to have an argument for why.
Right.
And so, and outrage is a continuum, right?
Yeah,
Let's establish that. It's
right.
not like you just. Yeah, there are different levels of being outraged.
Right.
I would say that's why I think extreme levels of outrage are more so reserved for things like school shootings. Like, if you're outraged about what happened with to Chris Rock, more so than what happened in Nashville, then something you're measuring sticks off there, But I'm not as outraged as a lot of people are. One reason is probably because I'm a huge fan of Will Smith.
I was gonna say, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The other reason is that I read his book.
Yeah.
And Carrie knows I'm a huge fan of the book.
Yeah.
I was really upset because I'm like, man, can I still recommend this book to people?
I know. I think we had that discussion. Mm-hmm.
I know. Mm-hmm. Like, I was really upset about that.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I haven't recommended it as much because I don't know how people feel about it.
Yeah.
Sure.
It changes. Yeah.
But it goes back to kind of a similar thing with the musicians. It's like, does the information in the book hold of less value because this happened?
Right. I know. And I do think that there isn't a good answer to that. Right. I think, again, you should kind of dig around with why are you less outraged, and can you live with that if you're not as outraged as other people because you're a fan of Will Smith?
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay, all right.
So I have the book right here.
All right
here. So this is the last thing we're going to talk about is the book called Will by Will Smith. Mm-hmm. And I had planned on writing a blog about this book, and I was going to focus on a part that he calls Uncle Fluffy. Yeah. In the book. Remember, you and I, Carrie doesn't even have to read this book because I have told her all about it. And Hannah's back there who's working our screen. She's shaking her head because
she's heard all about it.
She's heard all about it.
And probably anyone else who knows Josh has heard all about it.
And a lot of my clients have heard about it. And it sits on my bookshelf right in plain view. But I was going to write about Uncle Fluffy because it gets into parts language, and you and I are really big into parts language and a model of therapy called IFS, which stands for Internal Family Systems. But I decided to write about the general, which is another part, because after the slap, I was like, I felt like that if you read the book, and you have to read the whole book because it's toward the end, where he starts talking about Uncle Fluffy and the general, I think we saw the general, and that's the blog that I ended up writing about. And I think if people read the book, they would probably understand I disagree with most theories about what happened.
Okay.
Like why was he was defending, people saying like he's just defending his wife and other things. It's like I think he was in a completely different space because I think he was triggered by trauma. Is just theoretical.
You don't know him personally.
I don't know him personally. I haven't sat down with him.
You've read his book. You love the book.
I've read the book.
You don't know him personally.
But that you if you dive into his life, and this is another reason why people don't like to critically think, because you can see, you might be able to connect what he went through in the trauma he went through as a kid and the violent family history that he experienced, and he identifies he says in the book like one of the most strongest feelings that he had, or identities, I guess you might say, is feeling like a coward, right? and he didn't look like a coward in that moment.
No, he didn't.
Right, and that basically, he talks about from those traumatic experiences how the Fresh Prince came about and how all his success came about. And that's where he talks a lot about Uncle Fluffy. But he's like, what always surprised people was he had this kind of stark contrast sometimes where he's like always this fun, fluffy, bubbly guy, and then all of a sudden he could get really mean and intimidating. And he talks about that in here, and I was like, that seems like that's what happened anyways. We'll let him and his therapist work that out.
Hopefully.
But it is another reason other than being a fan of Will Smith. It is a reason why I'm not as outraged. I do stand on the side of Chris Rock, and like I feel terrible for him in ways that I don't feel bad for Will Smith, But how Chris Rock has had to handle this emotionally, and there's not he could do 1,000 specials, and it's not going to take away that moment for him in his life.
Right.
So there is some outrage there. Not enough for me to I'm actually hoping he'll write a sequel so we can understand what happened. But I'll still watch his movies and partake in his art.
Okay.
I still haven't watched Emancipation, but I probably will eventually. That's his latest movie, just in case you didn't know.
Okay, yeah.
Carrie probably doesn't know.
I did know, but thank you.
You did?
Thanks for clarity. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but yeah.
But anyways.
Well, you've done a good book synopsis and somewhat of a therapeutic analysis.
I feel like you're going, okay, how many times have I heard this?
No. But I think that what you're saying is if you can critically think and understand even where people are coming from, that maybe it'll make you see things differently, which is what we do all day long, right?
Right.
Is ask people, what do you think is going on? What else could be going on? Where could things be coming from? And that is critical thinking. And I think, though, to clarify, understanding doesn't give you permission.
Sure.
Right? It doesn't make it okay.
That's a good point. I think that is one thing that also makes it hard for people to critically think an issue.
Yeah.
Because if I dive into, it's just a lot easier to judge you for drinking out of straws.
Sure.
Out of plastic straws.
Yep.
That's easier to do than to say, well, what is it? How do you justify that in your mind, and to kind of hear your argument on how you reconcile that and make you a human being in it all is just more difficult because when you start doing that, it makes me start doing that.
Right.
Just like Chris Rock just saying that about Michael Jackson and R. Kelly, it just immediately made me go, and I don't like that feeling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We don't like feeling contradictory. Human beings really tend to. That's why we do all the kind of psychological and emotional things that we do to try and make complex issues simple. Right. But compassion and understanding, I actually think it may not give you clarity as far as feeling completely comfortable, but I think it gives you wisdom. Right. And so to think about what was going on for Will Smith when that happened, I still think that gives you wisdom. It doesn't permit what happened. Right. It doesn't make bullying okay if you understand what the bully is going through. Right. I think it actually probably helps us deal with bullies, right?
Exactly.
So,
and I think comedians are. I think a lot of them are great critical thinkers, and that whole special he illustrates. Of course, this is him firing back at Will Smith, but he does use examples from Will Smith's life and the life things going on in their family, and kind of pointing out all this stuff is happening, and yet he's the one that gets slack on national television. Like, it doesn't make any sense, and so he would call that selective outrage, right? Yeah. But again, what would be hard, and I don't think Chris Rock owes it to Will Smith to take a deep dive into Will Smith's life to try to develop that compassion for him.
Make peace, no. That's the choice he gets to make.
But exactly, and we all get to make.
That's right.
But I think that also is circumstantial based upon that didn't happen to me, and so it's a little easier for me to take a dive into Will Smith's life to try to understand what happened in that moment, where Chris Rock is going to care less because he's the victim in that situation, right? So,
yeah.
So that's a good point. I appreciate you saying that.
Sure.
I think that's all.
I think we're leaving you with unclear feelings and guidance, which is exactly.
I feel much more vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Do you ever be like, we critically think all day long, I just sometimes don't want to?
Absolutely. I think that people in my life hear me say things like, I'm done, I'm not engaging anymore.
But you're a therapist. That's one of the worst things, by the way. I hate hearing like friends and family say, like, you're a therapist, you should know this. I'm like, I don't want to be a therapist right now. I just want to be like you guys.
I'm at work, but I'm not at work. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate you guys doing that, sitting through that.
You helped Josh really talk through some things.
Helped me work through my Will Smith issues because I was like, oh man,
upset.
Come on, man.
Yeah. You just wanted to feel sympathy about him.
That was the first thought I had was like, come on.
I know.
For real? I just referred your book like to 30 people. I have to call people up being like, my bad. Like, don't turn on the news right now.
Finish the book
and then turn the news on. Right. I'm like,
oh no.
Okay. Well, I thought it was a good topic though, because I do think we're experiencing selective outrage in a lot of, mainly in the political world.
I think it's inevitable. And again, I think understanding that we're all walking around a little bit hypocritical makes us at least softer and more willing to be probably more compassionate to other people.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I think what makes people not hypocritical is when you are willing to see the inconsistencies or incongruencies in your life. Mm-hmm. So like someone could say you're hypocritical, but if you're like, well, I'm actually interested in that. Mm-hmm. I think that immediately offsets that because hypocrites aren't interested
in changing their mind.
In changing or hearing perspective and things. And so most of the time when we say you're hypocritical, people are just being people, really.
Sure.
And not really hypocrites. But there definitely are some, for sure.
Sure.
And we will go without naming them because we can all think of them in our minds. Right? Sure. Everyone's got an image right now in their head.
Right.
Don't comment on it.
Don't either. We won't either.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.